There we go.
Alright, we appear to be back. The question simply being, where did we leave off?
One way or another, I will be repeating the entire concept.
Alright then, that will solve the problem, I suppose.
So, we have been doing BoxerBot so far with at least one of the player's meters in the auto recover state. But actually, it's supposed to also help you train your meter awareness, even though that's not a specified goal of the bot, and you don't get any points for it. It is sort of an emergent property of fighting Boxer overall. You will end up using your V reversal to get away from a lot of the things you can do, and as a result, you can train yourself to watch your meter more by actually having the meter set to normal and making an effort to build it up yourself. Now, since obviously the character is not going to recover, and you're going to have to do that basically by blocking damage and taking damage, certain characters are definitely going to need to find a way to try to build up that meter so that they can do more reversals. But since the system is not really universal enough to other players, and the reversals don't always work the same way, we have not made this a point. Whereas with other bots that use this sort of thing, you tend to have reason for this all the time, and you're just trying to avoid something like chip damage. BoxerBot is mostly about recognizing the timings for using the thing, rather than specifically reacting to a specific thing he does. It's your decision when to use the reversal to get out of his pressure, or to avoid problems. It's not exactly good against his turnaround punch, but it's also not terrible depending on what he does.
I know at least for the Mika matchup, the super bar tends to be pretty important because without it, it almost goes 6-4 depending who has meter at any given point. Because having armor in that matchup is pretty important, since a lot of Boxer stuff and a lot of Mika's stuff isn't really multi-hit. Karin obviously has less of this issue, but we can't all be fabulous. But that was me more so just stressing, yeah, meter awareness is super important in this matchup. Just as a default. Because the things Boxer can do with meter are just completely different. So if you're not aware of what his meter is at, he might suddenly close in space on you when you weren't expecting, and then you're basically opened up.
Now, since he doesn't have to use his critical art, and you have no intentions of making him able to, it is possible to change his rhythm even slightly more by having his meter normal as well, because V trigger should be constantly rebuilding itself, so that when you decide to fight, he will get V meter to use whenever he wants. But if you're doing fairly well, you don't have to do this either. You can leave his the same way. It's up to you mostly. But as you can see, he doesn't really need to have his own meter building back up automatically. In fact, it may help if you don't have him this way, so that you get into the habit of watching his meter grind and how much he can actually use with it. also, in the same vein of crouching medium kick, if your character happens to have a relatively long range normal, other than the crush counter, or in certain cases, such as Rainbow Weakness, even if it is a crush counter, if there's any capacity to confirm this move into anything else, especially if the move itself or the hit confirmed from it is unsafe, you can add that to the current hypothetical of the crouching medium kick. So for example, Mika can use her charged drop kick. Marine doesn't really have any inputs like that at this time, but technically she can do Orochi into certain things with Holy Thing. She can do Orochi into other things, and Home is a good way to do it. But those things don't really require the sort of speed in terms of confirms that certain other characters need. And Boxer does not, as a general thing that you do confirms in neutral that aren't based on probably crouching medium punch or crouching medium kick. A few characters can probably manage with crouching medium punch and so on. It's very much up to what your character does and the spacing that they need to stand at. He won't move too much, which is part of what makes him not be particularly advanced, but it's not super difficult because he does tend to stay still. But that's what makes him good for hit confirms because he won't move as often as others. Therefore, you get.
We've lost Rillian here from our party. She will presumably be back shortly, and in fact, I will send her another invitation just in case she did not notice the drop.
No, I'm fine.
Welcome back.
I was noting that you don't generally have to worry about doing too many positive things to change the range of that. But he does tend to move rather suddenly, which can give you that same feeling. So while you are there crouching, thinking about what should you do now? Can I reach from here with this button? And you take a step forward, that moment you decide to take your step forward might be the moment you start to take damage.
I have experienced this.
And your heaviest focus should be hit confirming when on offense and mentally defensively confirming a state, namely which tapped head when you use it.
Yep.
To let you know, because normally you shouldn't punish it. Even if you could do anything, it's probably one of your fastest moves that you should actually hit. But the truth is that for the most part you shouldn't hit the fastest moves you have if he uses one of when he yells out 3 or higher. And also because it's possible for him to not detap at all depending on how much raw string pressure you put on him. Once again, the rhythm of the box can change. So it's heavily about meter watching, which is why if it cut out during the stream fail, I was noting that it is occasionally good to simulate an online environment by between rounds, sometimes changing the side of the screen you start off on. And that forces you to look at a different meter every now and then. It makes it more difficult overall to track, the same way that this happens to you in Real Magic.
Unfortunately, in training mode, however, your meters will always be on the left regardless of what side your character starts on. as you can see with me resetting here. So you don't quite get that full experience.
Another Capcom oversight that most of us obviously have never noticed. So my apologies for that. Once again, assuming that something I need to prevent to change, that's what we get.
That's an easy mistake with Capcom. Your chances are not as high as one would hope. And there's that mythical throw we talked about where Action 3 can end and leave you in getting thrown attacks. There was that dragon punch that I have not yet successfully punished even once. Although I think that may be the first time I've noticed at least to see it. It is slightly difficult to get to come out unless you manage to alter the bot's rhythm somewhat. Say you get a point for teching the throw, but the points you get for that are just simply not high. Anyway, for anyone joining us late, please note that our BoxerBot will be released this Sunday, most likely in the evening, on our 2-mk.org/bots, along with all our various other bots, which now cover the majority of the cast. The that you can go check out immediately. Oh man, were those the... They were, and I didn't punish a single one of them.
As usual, since we are quite aware that not everyone is super serious about the game, our DLC slots for characters that you need to actually purchase tend to have more of a secondary role that is also fulfilled by some other bot in our series. Or they're mostly matchup related so that you can focus on that instead.
And is there anyone else we should be advising our unfortunately poor boxer friends to... Anyone without Boxer's amount of money to have a look at instead?
Based on the general aims of this bot, mainly keeping you from defending a particular way the entire time, our recently released Lala bot, while she does have a totally different game overall, it confirms are a higher level sort of thing for most people. And therefore it's general assumption that if you want to just work on your defense and your spacing, Lara will generally be sufficient. And if you really feel the need to work on it from terms outside of what the game allows you to do normally, where you want to put some pressure on yourself and so on, you're more likely one of the sort of people who has access to this character in one way or another. But you can get a similar experience. The main thing that he gives, which is much more valuable than Lara's approach to it, is that he's much more capable of attacking low from far away. So if you have a tendency to walk backward to attempt to shimmy a lot in mid-range, or not, one of the things you can use this bot to help understand is what your defensive tendencies are, and therefore how to work on them. If you realize that most of the damage you take against this bot is from when he uses a low attack, which increases the longer he's in the trigger, it's probably a sign that you should watch your feet more. But if you find that you often get hit by his overhead, then presumably it means that you crouch block a lot, which isn't necessarily bad, but that you also don't necessarily have the responses required to react to an overhead, which can obviously be much more.
It can also teach you, if you're attempting to go for the jumping points, to remember to delay your jump in button, because for a neutral jump, if he's going to pass under you, you definitely don't want to be hitting your button early. Obviously you have to hit it late enough for things to work out, but... Actually, really, in the question that I seem to be experiencing based on just what I'm doing here. If I neutral jump, is my forward direction fixed by the jump? Will I turn around in the air?
You will not, which is actually really important because there are a lot of characters for whom this means a lot more than others. There are specific characters in the game who have really good short, long, lateral hitboxes on even your neutral jump attacks. And you can use this to protect yourself in those situations. And it's also something you can generally learn. If you don't play one of those characters, you may have to come up with something more creative. For example, Karim's neutral jump heavy kick, while really good in terms of forward space, doesn't hit behind her basically at all, even though it looks like it's light.
Indeed. Similar to her stand
slightly
heavy.
better off hitting her jumping, or if you're really fairly confident in the player you're going up against, and that they move at a timing where you would otherwise get a big confidence anyway, you could just jump and hit light kick on the way down, which is a lot safer and will have a weird effect on progress.
What sort of weird effect might that be?
Well, if Dog is approaching the maximum range and you jump light kick, it is the one with the most natural hitbox, as far as I'm aware.
Interesting.
And this will cause him to get not necessarily crossed up per se, but because of the way the hitboxes are spaced in the game, you're much more likely to hit him when he arrives under you at those ambiguous times. The medium kick obviously is probably among the best options there because it will cause any forward movement to be hit. But if you don't find that the Balrog player does forward movement a lot, you can get a lot out of it when you just jump and hit the leg.
I would not have expected the light kick to have more lateral behind than anything else. But it may be that it doesn't decide to cross up in the same spacings than, for instance, the medium kick.
It's also very important to know that because of the way that the character's body box is defined, moves that cause the feet to go lateral in the air a lot are better crossing up, partly because when you land directly on your feet, the game must decide where to place based on the boxes. And that's where ambiguous cross-ups come. There must be a point where the game decides you are in front versus you are behind. But by simple logic, there must also be a boundary between those points. And there's no specific way to see it except having a lot of experience with the character. Medium buttons tend to have this ability much more strongly than others if they cause the character's leg to extend horizontally. Light buttons, however, because of the general way that the light button moves relative to character opponent, hit and hurt boxes, or just more accurately their model box. Their push box are pretty small sometimes. You can make sure you end up in front, even though it looks as if they would have gone under you. And this is particularly good when you trap checkpoint in the corner and they're trying to get out in a particular way. For example, one good trick that Karim can use against Boxer is that at the point after she has hit with crushing the kick, she is going to score. She is at some risk if he decides to hit button. But she's usually fairly far out as well. If she immediately neutral jumps, and there's any delay in opponent's reaction, she can get a lot on him because he tends to move forward in a specific way. But neutral jump heavy kick doesn't always do the job in that phase, whereas neutral jump medium and light like we're talking about when she has done this combo that pushes Snow out, at least this either stand or crouch medium punch into crouch medium kick. This is a relatively long push pass.
Indeed.
She can just jump, but she can only jump straight up because otherwise you have too many options. Because you'll know at that range, he doesn't really have a button to hit that will definitely be sure.
Right,
But
he'd
he
have to
does
pull
have
off
other
his
things that-
Dragon Punch almost, wouldn't he?
Yes, and for that he'd have to be expecting that he was going to take counters because his Dragon Punch small attacks are not actually counters.
I see. And is obviously not the safest thing in the world nonetheless.
Now obviously if you always do the jump, you'll start to do Dragon Punch, but maybe you can use that the basic. Overall, the idea though is to understand that you can get neutral jump to keep you safe in different ways, and that not every button that the button should hit in front and behind actually does so.
Yes, definitely
Now,
something you need to know about your
specific
own
characters
buttons
have that
especially. The specific character, what now?
There are specific characters who have that ability.
And so you can end up using BoxerBot to train you to be able to react to the spacings, understand where and when you're going to not just get your hit confirmed from, but on the negative end, if I should be trying the neutral jump thing and other such. Because obviously that outcome you just saw is much preferable to getting continuously pressured after I've missed this, depending on what he's going to be doing.
And just as a general small outline, part of the reason why light buttons or medium buttons tend to be helpful is that you can hit them later in the jump due to them generally having short startups. This helps a bit because the term that we are all now becoming rapidly familiar with, trip variant, helps a lot when you are trying to do neutral jumps and hit nothing. So that you can land an instantly blocking kick, probably react in time, but not quite in time to necessarily harm you. A button that you can hit later into the jump is also easier to not hit when you know how to hit it. Parries, for example, is a difference of 7 frames on the jump and heavy kick startup. Double check that. I know this is definitely true for camping. another reason why it's useful to use it. You can use it to find out things about your jump patterns that are hard to get in real matches. And generally, aside from playing yourself while other people go next to someone jump up and hit them, which isn't really a representative of what's really going on. But if you watch yesterday's stream, I'm sure you'll understand how dangerous not having to guard actual air things. But unfortunately, with Balrog, it doesn't make as much difference as his the air, and most of his rush buttons will actually hit you in the air. So you actually are looking to pick up buttons to hit that changes your hurt boxes enough that you don't get hit by rushes.
And there's that fabled view reversal.
Primarily, it doesn't really have any counterpoints. There's no system for which the bot gets any points of its own. Those who are familiar with our bots know that occasionally a bot is given a point for an action that we don't want the user to take against the bot, but the bot is still the required action and can only be so good.
Sadly, they have not yet given us a full programming language in the game.
And even if it did, it would actually sort of defeat the purpose. Not a lot, but sort of. A bot must have weaknesses. Sometimes, however, we give a bot points when one of its weaknesses is extremely blatant, but can't be removed while it's keeping the bot function as it should be. And then the player is basically discouraged from doing the thing that is negative for it. If we did apply this to this bot, though, it won't be in the sense of this bot getting points, because the player would end up doing this looking at strategic moments to do particular things. But we would probably make it one of those where we subtract points from the player for doing particular things, and then turn it into a mental exercise of whether or not the player wants to do one thing, give up 1 point, add a chance of somehow getting more points. But this is only there to let people who are interested in using this bot directly know that if you find yourself falling into too much of a rut, doing stuff that the bot isn't responding to in any way that you find preferable, it's probably one of the things that you should stop doing. For example, regular forward jumps against this bot, he does have the capacity to stop you. So if you do it occasionally, it might be well. But he's not really designed to be able to beat that. He spends a lot of time crouch blocking, and therefore it becomes relatively easy to do that against him. Similarly, since he's usually holding throw and technically can't press it to attack other stuff, throwing him is really easy. And because he's Boxer, has no good wake-ups to do anything in that. So obviously if you find that your own style is so weak in doing those things, You should probably subtract some points when you jump in on him and try to jump in combos. Or use throws to defend yourself. Those sort of things. But overall, it wouldn't matter too much because those things give you no points. The only thing they would help you with is repositioning the bot. And this doesn't really make much difference in how much points you can get from him either way. So it is actually something you can do, but for players who are trying to work on their own bad habits of jumping into rush, please bear in mind that you're not necessarily doing well if you can beat up on the bot and get points by mostly immediately back. And you should look into whether or not it really is something you need to subtract points from yourself for. Because while the bot may not be able to hurt you, you're here to learn, and therefore should give yourself some incentive to not do things that you know lead to bad outcomes on your side.
You also have the option, of course, of mixing up the point system however it suits you, to make sure that you learn what you're interested in from this or really any bot. For instance, if I find myself that when I'm trying to work on hit confirms of a particular type, I realize that I'm just kind of always doing this. Of course I'm going to accumulate the points from the times it succeeds, but perhaps I want to say for a while that I don't get any points from positive confirms, only negative ones. And that balance it out that way the first time. Or even just grant 2 points for something instead of 1. Because at the end of the day, the bots exist for one purpose only. To help you get better and have a slightly less miserable time grinding or practicing various things, and give you situations to work in. So if it isn't working for your learning, change it. Whether it's an action that you want the bot to do something else, whether you want to change the point systems just so that you can focus on something or have less incentive to do something that you feel is wrong. Feel free to create your own variants of any aspect of our bots. Or you can talk to us if you like. If you are curious about something or have some ideas, perhaps a variant you wish to share, you can reach us from the email address on the contact page of our website, 2-mk.org, and let us know what you think. We would be glad to publish your variant if you're interested, or certainly answer any questions you may have. Yes, somehow I have a little trouble talking and surviving at the same time in certain instances. Like that one.
If you want to be particularly cruel to yourself, you could probably do throw tag points.
What do you mean?
Getting a point for throw tagging.
Perhaps. It's not that common of a thing, but if you want to try
That's
try
why
it,
it
sure.
would be cruel. You're not understanding.
Cruel, but not educational, which punishing yourself is far from the points of our bots, or anything else we try to do. However, if you do want a bot that will help you learn to throw tech, I would suggest you at least consider Ken and possibly Cammy, was it? That would give you some opportunity to deal with throws.
Karine too, although it's still not a bad thing, because I mean,
it might be more accurate to say that if you look for the spaces at which you could be thrown, and think about whether or not you would need to tackle those spaces, it's much more important in that way.
yeah.
And then maybe just see what happens when you try to throw in those spaces. Anyway, but in this case, this is what the decision is. So while you could attempt to give yourself points for throw tech, there is a good way to think about it. Because even though he doesn't throw, if you keep on accepting it, if you keep on trying to put yourself in the mental position of thinking about throw as an option, then you'll end up training yourself better for real matches and seeing what happens to you when you are focused on that and you're only thinking of the goals for the throw, how much damage you're going to take.
It might be a good exercise to do regardless, though, especially against Balrog. Don't have as much matchup knowledge. And even with a lot of matchup knowledge, you'll find yourself blocking quite a bit.
One additional reason why this is helpful, especially if you're not feeling as being punished for things he does, is that if you aren't aware, his turnaround punch is basically throw invincible. You should consider for the most part that it's throw invincible. It is not absolutely so, but in any real situation where your opponent is trying to use it, you're not going to throw them, you're going to end up getting it. The sort of thing you should probably learn if you intend to get into a high level. But I'm always one to suggest that a player who is still working their way to bronze or low silver not spend too much time teaching themselves every little thing, because it tends to lead to a frustrating situation, at least for some of us. Trying to learn too many things that have effects on, let's say, maybe 10% of matches. But you could mostly just ignore it. At higher levels, you would definitely need to know this though, so you can definitely observe the times where a particularly powerful version of Cat gets away from a hit leader and that can help you recognize the situation.
Yeah, only the higher level taps or strike invincible venom.
Ouch. The other thing you can, of course, do if you see him going under you is simply neutral jump and do something like that on the other end. Giving you a better option if you end up with him slightly too far away to be hit by your cross-up options. And the ever rare throw.
Well, that's all from me.
And I think for me as well.
All of you Street Fighter fans are catching up with the whole events. We definitely have some interesting matches, some things that people would call upsets, but generally if you watch the players, these matches are less upsets and more good performances. And some news on the game itself. I suppose the nostalgia costume people finally got shaken down for actually delivering their product. I'm still convinced that's how that went down.
Contractors finally came in, months late and over budget.
And we can all assume that we're going to be getting a new looking stage for sure based on the Street Fighter. We can see that we're getting some new final fight concepts maybe added to the game. We're definitely seeing some new stages that we know are coming that have already been announced. And we're looking forward to at least some interesting characters. The leaks have all indicated that it's Abigail. There's no specific reason why Capcom is trying to pull on Amy at this point, but you never know. But I say look out for our new huge Raptor Puncher, not necessarily to be joined with the game on the 25th along with all of this content, but certainly that they will be announced during Top 8 as promised. And we'll get their first look at them this weekend. As for us, as mentioned before, BoxerBot will be released on 2-mk.org, presumably before Top 8. And we are planning to use Equal Top 8 at least somewhat to guide the remaining bots that will be released. So you can expect that whoever makes it to Top 8, we will see the bot follow on pretty soon, and we'll see if we can take some inspiration from what we actually did in the match. Just in case the people coming up in the ranks inspired by that earlier season's play have watched their matches and tried to take something from it, we will try to make sure that you have something from the bot to stand up against it.
Alright, and given that, I think we will be done for the evening now. So, we're off back to the Evo streams, and hope you have a good evening as well, and enjoy the tournament weekend yourself. This is Kanzuki Dynasty.
Just fine.
And Rillian.
Signing off for the night. Come visit us at 2-mk.org/bots, just a bit before Top 8, or let's be honest, after it, for BoxerBot, along with anything else you may find interesting. Have a good evening, anyone.